Well, we want to also look at another big event that will be happening in the course of next week, and that is the SME Festival. And the founder is with us this afternoon, and she is going to be talking to us some of the key issues around this particular conference, and that is Dorcas Muthoni, the founder of SME Fest. Many thanks, Dorcas.
Thank you.
Well, many would like to know why the SME Fest, and of course, the president yesterday did touch on SMEs, saying they play a critical role in growing the economy, really.
That's really true. Actually, I had a lot of information about job creation, and actually the president talked about a gap in the delivery of Jubilee pledges before about job creation. And I think the answer for job creation actually lies in the SMEs. Mm-hmm. Because we've seen a lot of layoffs happening already from the corporate sector, and we know that everybody else will go back to the market to get opportunities for employment. And if our SMEs are not scaling, mm-hmm. if our SMEs are not expanding, if the revenue of the SMEs is not increasing, then the rate of absorption of school leavers and graduates is going to continue to impact greatly in terms of the number of opportunities that are available for people seeking jobs. Mm-hmm. So the reason we created SME Fest is because we need a platform where collaboratively through public sector and private sector, we get together and create conversations to see SME development. Because a lot of the times, the SMEs are on their own. Mm-hmm. And most of the time when we speak about, entrepreneurship, we're either speaking about really small people that are starting, or the groups that people are told to form maybe to access funds, through government, or, win competitions for business plans. That is good. But I think where we need to put in a lot of money is the people who've already invested capital. Interesting. And actually gone in, created a few jobs, because these are the people that can actually scale and actually already probably have little structures or significant structures sometimes to actually absorb more.
Okay. Yes. And Muthoni, SMEs have always complained of lack of access to capital, and we've seen a number of companies coming on board just trying to give SMEs financial support, grants, and the narrative has now changed. We're not seeing many SMEs transition into becoming the big corporates. Now that we've tackled the issue of capital to some extent, of course, there's still a lot to be done. But why aren't we seeing that transition where you hear of an SME, many don't make it beyond the second year since they began? What's wrong with SMEs?
I'm actually not sure the issue of SME financing is really being dealt with. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this. If I look at the kind of SME that, is looking for 2 million shillings in terms of a loan, or 10 million shillings, or even 100 million shillings, what we are saying is that they have to go into the organizations that are providing financial services and actually, express their need. And what you find is that, half the time, maybe the SME is not prepared, which is a big deal because of, a huge gap in terms of record keeping, business record keeping. But the other half is that even if you qualify, half the time, people do not have the kind of collateral, because what happens is that if I need a loan that is 50 million, I probably need a collateral that's valued at 100 million. Yeah. And a lot of people don't have this. Mm-hmm. So it actually means that if we keep to the system that we're using today, then this will continuously be a problem, which is why we want to have a conversation, because we know that the future of financing is actually going into fintech. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how prepared our financial services sector is around this. We've seen a lot on this, but mainly around personal finance. But business finance, there's still a huge gap, and I think there's room for lots of innovation. But having said that, this is the really purpose why we need to create platforms where people start having the SME conversation. And the SME that is actually, already invested and is looking to scale to avoid the stagnation that we are seeing, so that even private sector, for example, banks can begin to think, oh, we've used this system for so many years, and it doesn't seem to to help us shift the market. So these are some of the things that actually need to be discussed so that people start to change their focus or start to be more innovative or start to think differently about this segment called the SME segment. You
mentioned a very critical issue that financing is yet to be fully addressed. We are seeing interest rates have been capped at 14%, and this was hoped that it would see many SMEs enjoy cheaper credit when it comes to taking up loans for expansion, for asset financing. But what's really the story behind this, and will it be forming a basis of discussion at the SME Fest?
Obviously, yes, this is definitely a topic that will come up and always comes up. Actually, my experience from the interest caps, we all wanted this to happen, and it happened, and we were happy. The only thing that we have seen is that a lot of financial institutions have begun actually being very cautious about lending now, because they think it's really high risk. Because when their income margins are really low, and then they go into this space very aggressively, and they always profile it as a very high risk market, then they feel a little bit unprepared for what's happening and the dynamics. So that hasn't actually created true business solutions. Actually, I think if you walk into a few big banking halls, I doubt you'll see very busy business desks in terms of SME lending.
Well, I just wanted to pause for a short while. We have some breaking news now that Hayatu has been ousted, and he has been ousted from the CAF Congress. This is developing and breaking news actually that we are receiving at this hour. And we understand that Madagascar Ahmed is now the new head of the CAF, and this is the biggest story we are receiving at this hour. And of course, this continues to generate a lot of heated reactions there. Of course, the votes were happening, and he actually garnered 34 votes. And this is news coming in that Hayatu has been ousted from the CAF Congress, and this is one of the key stories we'll be developing in the course of the hour. And of course, on Worldview, we'll be giving you the latest on that story. Well, let's get back into our conversation. And of course, Dorcas, finally, looking at the ecosystem for SMEs, do you feel the government has done a good job in trying to set a good, conducive environment for them to thrive?
Obviously, the government is always busy doing some stuff to enable, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And we are really happy because the government is actually very supportive through the ministry of the SME Festival. And that's because the government is somehow, finally paying a lot of attention to see what they could do about this. And that's because of what we just said at the beginning, which is for us to create jobs, for us to expand this economy, we must get into the SMEs and actually support those that have already invested, so that we actually begin to see more graduation of SMEs into corporates and our corporates into multinationals. But if we don't have good strategic support, especially policy-driven decisions that actually help us to become not necessarily consumers of manufactured goods, but actually producers of manufactured goods, friendly. I would imagine that things like removing duty on packaging and processing equipment would actually cause a manufacturing revolution, beginning from very small scale to large scale.
All right.
And these are some of the things that I think government can take as a strategic action. I also think about tax incentives. I think we've seen that a lot of SMEs have become a bit of fugitives, trying to run away from the taxman.
All right.
And this is because there's really heavy punishment and no one to stand in for you.
All right.
And so we think this is kind of support that can be provided.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do know that the policymakers will be taking a keen listen to this, and they'll be forming part of their future plans. We've been speaking there to Dorcas Muthoni, the founder of SME Fest. Many thanks for speaking to us.